Hello there, welcome back to the Codex. So I'm finally doing my video covering Oraxia, the finally meme-made reel of the Spider Warframe. Honestly, she's pretty good, I like her. Let's go ahead and go over at least two different builds for her that you can use. First off, per usual, the Archon Shards. I am going, again, per usual, very high investment, all Talford Shards. I do actually think that if you enjoy her playstyle, she's worth it. I've found her actually quite fun and quite good, which is of course always a good combination for a new Warframe to have. The shards I'm using are 2 Talforged Duration Shards, which is 30% duration in total, 2 Talforged Strength Shards, so that's an extra 30% strength, and then 1 Talforged Casting Speed Shard. The casting speed definitely feels nice in this frame, especially if you cast on her as much as I do, primarily the second ability. Speaking of her abilities, let's go ahead and talk about that. So, I am doing a very health tank focused build. I know a lot of people will say you can just go invisible, you're basically immortal as long as you just keep wall lashing. I've heard complaints though from a lot of players. They don't like the playstyle of being forced to wall latch to survive. The fact that you can wall latch indefinitely is very fun, and having that on-command invisibility and infinite wall latching is a very cool mechanic that I like to use intermittently, but this build allows you to not have to purely rely on that to stay alive. Now, her fourth ability gives you a massive max health multiplier. That is the main thing that makes this work. With all the strength on this build, which if you look at the strength, it looks really low because it says that it's only 125%, but we're using Precision Intensify, so specifically for the fourth ability, which is the main one that we care about, this, instead of 125, is actually 215% already, and then there's another 25% from Growing Power you can get, and then another 60% from Molt Augmented, and another 60% from Kamisado. So in reality, this build can actually get to over 300 strength. It's just that a lot of the strength is conditional in the build. And there's even more strength in that we can get in the build that we'll talk about later on if you want to pump it up to potentially 400% plus. Now, I know I'm going to get a question in the comments of why am I not using Arcane Bellicose? Bellicose is a pretty potentially ideal option on her because you can fairly easily hit the max health threshold needed to trigger the full 72% buff of power strength. The problem with Bellicose on her is that if you care about your arcanes, your strength arcanes that is, in particular buffing the fourth ability included, Bellicose doesn't actually do that. Only the portion of Bellicose that you have before the fourth ability is triggered is the amount that the fourth ability will benefit from, since the fourth ability giving you that extra health only while you're in the fourth is what triggers Bellicose being maxed out. That means that the fourth ability itself can't actually benefit from the full 72% because that 72% is only active because of the fourth ability. Therefore, it's not able to be snapshotted on. That's why I chose to use Molt Augmented, which is essentially a always-on 60% strength after you get 250 kills, and Kamisada, which is again a functionally always-on 60% strength. So this is 120% strength that will both fully apply to the fourth ability, which is why I chose that. If you care more about shifting your strength more towards the first 3 abilities, you can feel free to use Bellicose because it is a very good option for other builds. Now, looking at the build here, there's a few different things that are, again, health tank oriented. We're using Adaptation, of course. This helps quite a bit. Once the fourth ability is up, we'll have anywhere from a minimum of 2,500 up to 4,000 plus health, depending on how much strength you snapshot on. Now, the problem with that is that, sure, we might get up to 4,000 health, for example, but she has basically no armor. She only has 125 armor. So all of that health looks like a nice health pool, but it barely has any mitigation. So obviously Adaptation helps that, but the thing that really helps that is health conversion. Her first ability lets you basically infinitely generate a large amount of health orbs and energy orbs, and all of those health orbs that you constantly spit out is going to constantly keep your health conversion stacked up. So this gives you an extra 1,350 armor effectively permanently. So that takes this paltry 125 armor up to all the way over 1,400. Now, over 1,400 armor paired with potentially 4,000 health, for example, makes you quite a bit tankier. Speaking of those health orbs from the first ability, we're also benefiting from those via having Equilibrium on the build. This will functionally give you infinite energy, and you'll see that it really is infinite energy once we get into the gameplay here. Everything else, we're using 2 range mods. We're using Overextended, actually, yeah, 2 range mods, Overextended plus Cunning Drift. The reason why I chose Cunning Drift as my X-list is for 2 main reasons. One, since the fourth ability already makes you status immune, that means that you don't need Prime Surefooted like we use on most builds, because you're already going to be knockdown immune, as well as fully stats immune, which is very nice. Also, with only overextended, that would only give us 190% range, and the fourth ability is able to give you up to a 10 meter, if you have 200% range, Toxin Nova detonation on any enemies that you kill with your Toxin imbued weapons. If we only had 190% range, then we wouldn't quite be maxing that out, so this extra little 15% range here caps it out for you. It's not a huge deal, it just feels good knowing that I have that max range Nova. You can, of course, replace that with whatever else that you want. It's just a really cool thing to have. The rest of Prime Flow, obviously just our generic energy. Our strength is Precision Intensify, specifically for the fourth, Transient Fortitude, plus Growing Power, plus the Arcanes for everything else. Now, in terms of the abilities here, just a quick little overview if you guys don't know what her abilities actually do. I already talked about some of it. The first ability, Mercy's Kiss, basically any enemy that's at half health or less, you can instantly kill them with this ability, and they drop a ton of orbs. Again, that's useful for multiple reasons, primarily health conversion and equilibrium. The second ability, Webbed Embrace, puts down a very potent crowd control effect that puts everybody inside the web. They basically go to sleep inside the webs. They're cocooned, and it gives them a very large damage vulnerability. Once we have all of our strength going, this is going to increase the damage they take by more than double. And that's very, very important for one of the weapons that she's using that we'll talk about in a moment here. The third ability, Widow's Brood, you launch stingers at enemies, and when it poisons them with toxin damage, and when they die, they drop scuttlers, which is her basically spiders that serve her. These spiders are very, very useful at helping you do extra damage, thanks to Archon continuity, which we'll talk about in a moment here. The fourth ability, which is the bread and butter of the build, Silken Stride, you go into her spider form, you get a huge max health multiplier, you get built-in guaranteed toxin damage, which is non-combining, by the way. So even if you were using a weapon that did pure heat damage, you would still be doing pure heat and pure toxin. It's non-combining, just like kind of similar to how Toxic Lash works, for example. And that damage bonus is doubled when you're wall latching. So if you really want to mess guys up, you can wall latch and instantly double that bonus. Very, very cool. And again, you do get that explosion toxin nova on any enemies that you kill. At base, it's 5 meters, which can go up to 10 meters at cap with 200% strength, or sorry, range or more. Now, I mentioned the scuttlers are nice. So both the scuttlers proccing toxin for you and the toxin nova from the fourth ability, which is a forced toxin proc, both trigger Archon continuity, which means you're also going to have free corrosive procs spreading all around the map for you, and that's a nice free armor strip. So again, that's extra damage for basically no extra cost to you, so that's excellent. Now let's talk about the weapons. She synergizes exceptionally well with the Kuva Sobek. Now, this isn't necessarily a hyper-optimized build, but it has all the things that matter the most. When it comes to Kuva Sobek, or the regular Sobek, if you want to use the regular one, Acid Shells is a absolutely crazy augment. It says enemies explode on death, dealing 450 corrosive damage, and plus 45% of the enemy max health in a 15-meter radius. So it deals a portion of enemy's max health in a 15-meter AoE. There's only a few things in the game that scale that extra damage up. One of the things is Banemont, which is why I'm using Primed Cleanse Orokin, because I'm going to go do my typical showcase mission of the Conjunction Survival and all the enemies there are Orokin. So this multiplier applies to that 45%. Another thing that applies is damage vulnerabilities. So the fact that Oraxia has a massive vulnerability multiplier makes Acid Shells absolutely insane on her, as you'll see once we go to the gameplay. Now, the other two weapons can be whatever you want. The melee, you can't even melee when you're in your fourth ability, so the melee really doesn't matter at all. I'm using the Okina Prime Incarnin because one of the Okina Incarnin evolutions that you can pick is this one right here, which gives you plus 30% movement speed. This is a global movement speed multiplier, and this will affect your spider walking speed while you're in her fourth ability. So that's basically just a quality of life stat stick. The reason I'm using the Grimoire is because of the Grimoire mods, primarily the Vomnification. This gives you up to 60% additional strength. If you pop this into a crowd of enemies, and you get that 60% strength before you go into your fourth ability, that's basically a free extra 60% strength that you just snapshotted on top of everything else for your fourth ability. So even more health, even more toxin damage. It's excellent. You can also use the Power Drain mod and Mercy Kill an Eximus enemy to get that 50% free strength. So like I said, there's a lot of ways that you can stack strength onto the fourth ability to really juice up that health and really juice up that damage. Now, your companion can also be useful too. I'm using a slightly different version of my Panzer build because we're going to have so much health from the fourth ability and so much health from health conversion. That will make Link Vitality and Link Fiber actually very effective at keeping your pet alive, at least at like normal Steel Path levels, into the few hundreds at least. So the health and armor that you see in the arsenal right now are actually not what it's going to have, because these mods do scale with conditional buffs. So once I get into the mission and I cast that forth and I pick up those health orbs for the armor, that will scale over to the Panzer and make it dramatically tankier. Also, because of the fourth ability being a channeled ability, you can benefit from Seismic Bond, and your companion can basically give you a free 30% extra ability efficiency. So it's like you've equipped a Streamline, but on your companion. So it's 30% efficiency at no cost to your actual Oraxia build, which is very nice. Now let's go ahead and hop into a mission here and showcase how absolutely disgusting the Sobek is on Oraxia. All right, so here we are in the mission. We're only about 3 minutes in or so. We got the Molt Augmented stacked up all the way. Let's go ahead and re-pop our fourth. So again, keep in mind all the things you can do to juice up your strength. So let's pop my Matter-Eye double dash there for that 40%. Let's throw out my Grimoire for an extra 60%. You can see my Scuttlers up here are giving me 60% from Kamisato, and we have the 60% from Augmented. So now when we go into the fourth ability, and that wasn't even everything, by the way, I could have used Power Drain as well, for example. We now have nearly 4,000 health. So very, very good. And I'm not even sure if Growing Power was active for that cast. But yeah, you can get a whole lot of health from stacking up strength on this. And then again, you pair that with the very juiced up amount of armor from running health conversion thanks to all the free orbs that you'll get. And your tankiness is fantastic, obviously, even if you never turn invisible. Don't forget that you can turn invisible, though. You can latch to walls like this. You can stay wall latched permanently, and it gives you 8 seconds of invisibility. So if you want to keep refreshing that invisibility, you can just keep going from wall to wall. And the range on this is very far. I mean, it's actually crazy how far you can sling on this. You're basically Spider-Woman. It's awesome. So that's another playstyle that you can use. Obviously, you could just effectively stay permanently invisible. Make sure that you keep her second ability down. You can have up to 3 of these webbed embraces down. Really good crowd control and an excellent damage multiplier. As you can see here, the Sobek goes insanely hard with it. I'm going to shoot one guy, and just everybody in that general area detonates. Basically, everybody in 15 meters just explodes thanks to acid shells. It's incredible. Acid shells paired with the toxin damage from her fourth ability, paired with the Bane on the weapon, and paired with the vulnerability. Huge multipliers on top of multipliers on top of multipliers. Absolutely insane crowd killing damage. There we go. Yeah, like I said, you kill one guy and it just keeps cascading. If you're doing something like a survival, for example, and enemies are close enough to where there's continuously enemies within 15 meters of each other going down a hallway, you can literally cause a cascading detonation traveling basically an infinite distance. There's been times where I've killed 40, 50 guys with a single Sobek shot, like essentially, because they just keep detonating. Now, Violence is going to mess up my day, of course, because he's going to nullify me. Very annoying to do in a video, Violence. Why are you doing this to me, bro? There we go. Okay, he's taken care of. Very rude. Let's go back into the fourth here. Lost some of my strength, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. She's juiced up. Make sure you keep the third ability up as well. I don't have any of my Scuttlers down right now, and you want to make sure that those guys stay out to keep your Kamisato constantly stacking and just spread those free corrosive procs for you, which again, the free corrosive procs are going to make the Sobek even more effective. Now, you don't have to use a Sobek on her. I'm just showcasing the Sobek because it's basically her best weapon because she has such a powerful synergy with it thanks to her vulnerability and her fourth ability Nova. But you can use just whatever your favorite primary and secondaries are, and she will make them better just by giving them the extra toxin damage. So don't feel like you have to use the Sobek. It's just a very, very potent option. There is one more build I'll show you, actually. If you don't want to go the health tank route of surviving with health and armor and whatnot, and you prefer the more invisibility playstyle, and maybe you want to juice up your damage even more as well, there's one more kind of build you can use here. Let me show that to you. Hello, Editing Codex here. There's one more quick version of the build I want to throw in here that I kind of thought of after the video, and it's actually basically a slightly better version of the build you just saw as long as you can maintain your energy. So we dropped Prime Flow, and we're just using Equilibrium for our energy sustain. And where Flow used to be, we're now using Blind Rage instead. So basically, we threw another extra 99% strength on, which of course does make the build a lot better. However, we did sacrifice 30% strength, which still means that we net gained strength. We sacrificed 30% strength by replacing the 2 strength shards with 2 energy shards to partially offset losing that Prime Flow. So I just wanted to show you guys another option you can use. This is a strictly better version of the build because it's stronger, it has more power strength, as long as you can maintain your energy. If you want a more comfortable version of the build, though, that definitely keeps up your energy economy much more in like a smooth fashion, you know, without having to use your one as much, then you can use the version that you just saw. Anyways, moving on to the shield gating version of the build. Also, random really quick note, by the way, if you press the melee button while you're in her fourth ability, to automatically cast the first ability for you. Forgot to say that in the gameplay. Want to include that. It's very cool because you can't melees her anyway, so they changed that input into casting her one, which is it feels really smooth, so I like it. So here's a shield gating version of the build for those of you that don't want to go the health tanking, armor tanking, and you want to, like I said, rely more on the invisibility or maybe shield gating. Here's a version of the build you can use. It has even more strength because we've switched back to using blind rage on this version of the build. We're also using catalyzing shields. Obviously, we took off health conversion. We took off all of the things that are related to health and armor tanking. We're basically on this version of the build going to be surviving by just staying latched, staying invisible, and thanks to constantly casting primarily your 2 and your 3, catalyzing shields will constantly give you a shield gate back because she only has 45 shields with catalyzing on. So thanks to brief respite, both the 2 and the 3 both cost more than that, so they will instantly give you a full shield gate, so it's very effective. Now, if you do like the wall latch playstyle, you can use Crepuscular and Arachne. Crepuscular says while invisible, you get 30% extra ability strength and a huge critical multiplier increase of plus 3x final crit damage, and that does scale with critical tiers. So if you're using something that orange or red crits, this is a enormous amount of extra critical damage. So huge damage there. And Arachne says on wall latch, which is the other thing that she can do all the time, plus 150% damage to primaries and secondaries for 30 seconds. Now this is base damage most of the time, and it does say primaries and secondaries, but fun fact, this actually does apply to some melee projectiles, because the way that this arcane is actually coded is that anything that's a projectile basically is affected by this. So this does apply to glaives and Exodia Contagion projectiles from Zal. So you can make those, and it applies multiplicatively as well. So it does a huge amount of damage. So if you hop into a wall latch, and then you hop off and you throw your glaive, it's going to do even more absurd amounts of damage than they usually do. So just keep that in mind. I'll showcase this version of the build real quick, and then that'll wrap things up for us. So here we are with the shield gating and more invisibility focused version of the build. Definitely does good damage, as you can see here. Keep triggering that Crepuscular for the massive crit damage buff, and keep triggering the Arachne for the free base damage, which especially on something like the Base Assist, for example, which has multiplicative scaling on its Galvanized Savvy mod, can do absolutely ridiculous numbers for something like this. And this is without the vulnerability. If we throw the vulnerability down, we'll see it's even more absurd. There's so many damage numbers there, I can't even really see it, but it does millions of damage easily. So very fun to use. Very easy to stay alive as well. Even if I'm not invisible, in fact, I'll showcase that. I'll go ahead and let them shoot me and let them get my health down a little bit here once I turn invisible. And you'll see it's very easy to stay alive even if you're not invisible, because you can just keep shield gating super easily with your 2 and your 3 right there. I let my health get super low, but it doesn't matter as long as I just keep throwing this down. Totally solid, keep shield gating, hop back in that wall, turn invisible again. Just keep those shields going with catalyzing shields. So it's a different play style for those of you that might want to take her to much higher levels, like maybe level cap, for example. Might scale a little bit better. But for those of you that just want a very chill experience, I think you'll enjoy the health and armor tanking version of the build that I showed off first. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully I covered most of the aspects that you were interested in on Oraxia. I think this is a very fun Warframe, and I think this is actually a good Warframe. She's a good, additional frame to the roster. I'll actually be playing as her, which is always a good sign. She's not just going to go in the back rooms and never be seen again. You guys can let me know down below. Do you like her? Do you hate her? Is she good? Is she terrible? Can you not wait for her Prime to come out in, 6 years or whatever? And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Just a real quick note, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did and you want to support what I do, you can now do it for cheaper than ever. I just added a new tier to the YouTube membership offer, which is only $1 a month. For anybody that chooses to support me, or anybody who already has, I greatly, greatly appreciate you and everything that you do. Thank you very much. And now I will see you guys in the next one.